Hey, welcome back to this episode of Think Business Live. Looking forward to talking with AnneMarie Hayek-Evans. AnneMarie, it's great to connect with you today. I want to tell everybody a little bit about you. You are a cultural thought leader, generational expert, and social agitator who deeply understands society's evolution. You have founded and run two companies, Global Mosaic and ZSpeak, with a passion for navigating the cultural movements shaping our world. Also, you are the author of a book that we're going to talk a little bit about that I think people are really interested on this topic. It's called The Power and Promise of Gen Z, Generation We. And so let's talk about that. I think a lot of people right now are trying to figure out what the Gen Zs are all about, right? We had the millennials who began evolving the workforce, and now the Gen Zs, many of which are still in school, are coming into the workforce. And so talk a little bit about just kind of define for the audience. Let's kind of keep it simple and to start off with, define a Gen Z. Welcome though. Thanks so much for being here today. Define a Gen Z.
Thank you. And the first thing that I would say is, as someone who has studied culture and generations for my entire career, we certainly don't mean to oversimplify things, right? We're all individuals. You're an individual. I'm an individual. Right. But over time, as we study how humanity evolves, how our culture evolves, how corporate priorities need to evolve, all of these kinds of things, we find it's instructive to look at generational trends because people are informed, right, and influenced by the time that they grew up, by those formative years and what's going on in the world. It helps, it impacts their value system sometimes, their view of their world, and their place in it. So anyway, it's certainly as much of an art as a science.
Yeah.
Gen Z is officially the kind of dates that are used to define Gen Z are generally 1997 through 2010, which makes them around 11 years old to around 24 years old right now. As you said, we spent so much time talking about millennials who are now, millennials are not all that young anymore. They started at 25 and they're in their early 40s, and many of them have families and own homes and are full on adulting, right? Whereas the Z's are really the ones that are still in middle school and high school and perhaps higher education and just entering the workforce.
Yeah.
So they're the largest generation now. We've talked about how millennials have been so large for so long, but Z's are now 27% of the US population. And they're driving economically. They aren't the primary driver yet, but it's predicted they will be by 2030. And so they're already driving a lot of our culture, and they're already really increasing the requirements from our corporations and government officials. And so that's why people are really paying attention to them at this point.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So they occupy 27% of the population. And by the year 2030, they will be the primary economic drivers. Okay, so let's talk about that, because studies are also showing that by 2030, 85% of the jobs that exist in 2030 don't exist today. And so studies are also pointing to that the Gen Zs and the millennials will be part of the transformation of what those 85% of the jobs will be. So it makes sense that if they're building it with the technology, the mindset, and the ways that they were raised, that they then will be a primary, economic driver of that revenue and businesses.
Absolutely. And you think of the way that they grew up, right, as content creators. Really all Z's are content creators online. And one of the reasons that I felt so compelled to write the book is because everything that I was reading about Gen Z, or most of what I was reading about Gen Z, seemed very superficial. Still now, if you do a Google image search on Gen Z, you're just going to get a bunch of teenagers staring at screens. There's so much more than that. So really, the big story isn't how much time they spend on their devices. It is who that has made them. Being the first generation that are digital natives, who has that made them? Because we think about millennials as being really tech savvy, but the reality is Instagram, for example, didn't come out until the median millennial was 22 years old. So they didn't really grow up with social media in the same way.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Right. And they weren't creating in the same way. Whereas for Z's, they have had devices in their hands since the single digits
Right.
for sure, right? And all of the kind of apps that they engage in, for example, TikTok, right? They're more the TikTok generation, whereas millennials are more the Instagram generation. On TikTok, TikTok says anybody who creates a 10-second video and puts it on TikTok, you are then called a creator. So
Yeah.
Z think about themselves as creators, right? So they really have this unfettered creativity. And of course, the ultimate expression of creativity is to create your own life. And so the majority of Z's fully expect at some point during their life, or fully hope, right? And this might be partly naivete, they're young to some degree, but really believe and have the confidence that they can create their own thing. They can be an entrepreneur. Now, this doesn't mean that they want to be influencers, or they want to, there are lots of different ways to do this, but they very, very much are comfortable not being defined by somebody else's external definition of what success
Yeah.
looks like, what a job looks like, and are very, very, very comfortable creating their own space.
Yeah. It's so interesting. And I love the way that you're framing it, that they're creators and they create their own space, and that they have been raised to be creators, because it seemed like what the millennials were doing were really pushing for a lot of change that we saw once COVID lockdown hit in March of 2020, right? They were looking for more flex time, work from home. They were looking for more flexibility. They were, the kind of the workings of the everyday worker. It felt like they were, saying, hey, the 9 to 5 model doesn't work anymore, right? And nobody and people resisted, and then COVID kind of forced people to that. And it doesn't seem like it's going back. So now enter the creator mode. I think this is fascinating. So now you have a mindset, a generation where their mindset is just through living entrepreneurial, just through
Absolutely.
living. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you look at the way that they engage with the world as well. I'm a Gen X. So I'm pre-millennial, right? And I think about how I spent my teenage years at the mall or watching MTV or whatever it
Yeah.
was, right? And these Z's also have been raised in a time where there are so many critical issues happening in our world that they feel that they want and need to have a voice in, from climate change to gun regulation to gender equity, you name it, right? And so, not only in terms of their careers, but even in terms of social issues, more than 50% of Z's have participated in a march or school walkout or something. Think about that. The majority of the generation has participated and really had
Mhm.
a voice in some of the major issues of our day. So even that gives them this real sense from a young age that they have a voice, and they're
Yeah.
not afraid to use it. And they actually seek out the largest platforms, right? The largest online platforms. They go to DC in March. Amanda Gorman
Right.
kicks off Biden's Biden's inauguration. They have a voice and they're not afraid to use it. And so it's really a combination not only of their the way that they create online, but even the way that they have really stepped up and created these platforms in our larger world at a young age, which just gives them a huge amount of confidence.
Yeah.
They're also, if I may, also the way that they are connected online is different than how older generations are connected. So, for us, we tend to be very segmented as older generations. Not older, I'm calling us older, but I'm older than Gen Z, so older than 24, right?
Right.
Where, perhaps you are even our media, right? Are you a CNN person? Are you a Fox News person? Are you a, New York Times person? Right? We all know that
Right. Sure. Absolutely.
siloed and segmented. And what's really interesting is that for most Z's, they are on TikTok as their primary media platform, and and that's all first person storytelling. Everyone is sharing short videos. It's not just dance videos, it's largely first person storytelling of their lives, what it's like to be a 17-year-old growing up, and questioning their gender identity, or growing up Black and having to experience different injustices related to that, or whatever it might be. So they're seeing each other's stories, and it makes them very, very connected across the entire generation. So they're not as fragmented, they're not as segmented. Yes, they might have different politics, they might have different gender identities, they might have, different race, ethnicity, etc. But they really have used social media as a way to connect and become a more unified generation, in contrast to us older generations that have tended to use social media to further divide us. And so it allows them then to really be able to come together as a force. And that's
Yeah.
giving them as young people a real sense of power.
What you're saying right now is so fascinating in framing things in ways that I have not thought about. And so I think this is really interesting because I think as a business coach, I work with C-level suite, I work with managers, I work with salespeople. But one of the things I always talk about is we're all storytellers, right?
Yes.
And so what you're talking about is first person storytelling,
Yes.
which is in its own a huge skill set. And
Yeah.
so now I have a question to the business owner or manager who's listening to the show right now, or later on once it's on the podcast platforms, which is, how do you manage this type of person? How do you manage somebody who is used to being empowered with no shame to speak in first person stories and share their vulnerableness or any element of their life on TikTok or any social platform, who are creators, who have the entrepreneurial spirit and have been trained that way? How do you then manage that person in an organization?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things that I would say, because we're working with a lot of companies who are asking us these questions,
Yeah,
right? How do you hire and retain Zs? Again, the eldest are 24, right? So they've really just been entering the workforce the last couple of years. And of course, that's been during
yeah.
the heart
My
of
kids are Gen Zs. They're about to be 16 and 19. So they right in the yeah.
right. And so, in fact, even backing up just a second, we have been speaking with colleges and universities as well, because they have been saying, help us understand how to best meet the needs of this generation, because they are now seeing that Zs are entering colleges and universities and demanding, um, or looking for the ability to create their own majors, or these kind of, you know hacked majors that combine a bunch of different disciplines together.
Right.
And so really a lot of it is allowing Z's to enter a workforce and have the ability to really feel that they're contributing in terms of their thinking and in terms of their creative process. But I think that one of the misperceptions is that Z's don't expect to walk into an organization and have all kinds of, you know, power and be able to do all kinds of huge creative things. They're a very collaborative organization, or generation. Again, it goes back to how they've used social media and how
Right.
they collaborate together. So they just want to be part of teams where they can be heard and they can have a voice and they can be listened to and they can be part of that whole collaborative
Right.
process. The other thing that I want to say, because I think it's really important, and we wrote about this in we did we did a column for Forbes and for Fast Company, and in both cases talked about this point because I think it's so important that corporations, when they were recruiting millennials, again, that was more the Instagram generation. That was a period in time where we were really, idealizing the whole startup culture. And so as part of that, there were a lot of, hey, do you like coffee? We've got baristas on staff. We have rooftop gardens where you can hang out and work. We have, et cetera, et cetera. Z's, because they didn't grow up with the Instagram, they're not the Instagram generation. They're the TikTok generation. They have been exposed firsthand to everything that is real and raw in our world since they were really young. And so they're realists. They're not idealists. So they don't care as much about the baristas. They want to know that the place that they're operating, it has responsible, approach to how they operate in the world. They want real benefits. Mental health is something that's come up as being huge for this generation. We know that this generation has the highest reported kind of incidence of mental health awareness and potentially struggles as well. And I think that's a dark side of being exposed to everything that's real and raw and hard in the world 24/7 from a really young age. It's made them super aware. It's made them super savvy. It's made them, super mature. But it also there has been a price paid for that. So when we've talked to Z's, they talk about a company that really understands life work balance and mental health support, which means things like mental health days, right? It means it matters how you treat your employees and how you behave around each other. That those things are as important as salary to Z's. And they feel that a lot of companies aren't really getting that yet. I mean, I know when I was in my early 20s and I was working at a big advertising agency, oh my, the way that we were the way that we were treated, right? Back then,
Yeah.
we were slaves to our bosses, right? And we were not always treated with great respect. We certainly didn't have mental health days. So I think for a lot of us from older generations, we think that feels soft or whatever it might be, but it's actually very healthy for everyone in the organization.
Yeah.
And if you really want to have a compelling, be able to recruit Z's and offer compelling benefits, mental health has to be a part of that.
Yeah. It's it's so interesting too how you're talking about how they were raised so exposed to everything that you've reframed the mental health day, I think in a much more enlightened way that I think people can connect with. I want to talk to you about two things. First, I want to talk about college for a moment. How are colleges looking at applicants today? Are they looking at what the applicant did to have a voice? Are they looking in a positive way what how they've influenced on TikTok? What are they looking for today based on this creator generation?
It's a great question.
AnneMarie, you're breaking up a little bit.
Oh no.
All right, can you hear me now? There we go. All right, I think you're back. I can't tell.
I don't
All right,
know
there we
what's
go.
happening.
All right, there we go. All right, so we're talking about Gen Z is just waiting for. All right, there we go. All right, so how are colleges? Sounds like AnneMarie's having a little bit of technical difficulties as far as her internet goes, but what we were talking about is the power of Gen Zs and AnneMarie's book. AnneMarie, you back?
I'm here.
All
I
right,
don't
good.
know. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So how are college looking at applicants today?
So it depends on the college or university for sure, right? But as we've seen, and this was accelerated by COVID, that many colleges and universities are making their application process test optional now, or test scores like ACTs, SATs, ACTs, right? No longer required anymore. And more colleges and universities are adding these entrepreneurial kinds of majors, right? Or even if it's in the digital space, right? There's companies will say they can't hire enough people who have expertise in the digital space because so much marketing and advertising and creation happens in the digital space now.
Right.
And so really to be qualified to do any of those things, it's less about your score on an ACT or an SAT. And it is more to your point around what you've created. And from a spaces, they
Hold on, AnneMarie, you're breaking up again. You were saying that when things get created, it's more or less. You were saying you broke up when you said it's things that it is what you created.
absolutely. And so there's
So we're having some technical difficulties on AnneMarie's internet, but we're going to have her back for another show because I think this topic is fascinating. AnneMarie, you there?
I'm here and I
Yeah.
apologize. My Wi-Fi looks strong, but we keep losing each other.
Yeah.
So
You were saying, so they're looking at applicants from a creative standpoint.
you can actually see, right? Most Z's have a creative fingerprint digitally. You can see what they've created and what they've posted, whether it be on YouTube, whether it be some type of online store, whether it be their own digital photography or graphic design business, whether it be, there are so many different ways that Z's have already had the opportunity to be creating and putting their unique voice in the world from such a young age. So it's actually a much more I would say dimensionalized way to get a sense of a college college applicant than looking at an ACT or SAT, which was done in the past.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And and let's talk about the entrepreneurial Gen Zer today. Are they typically doing something on their own? Are they collaborating with other people? Are they self-funding? Are they getting investors? What does that path look like for the Gen Zs?
I will say this, a lot of us older generations look at Z's and millennials as well online and say, how much money can you really create? Can you really support yourself by being an online content creator, for example? We interviewed for the book a 22-year-old who is the youngest VC in the US, and she talked to us about this creator generation. And she said the thing that people don't understand is you really only need to have 500 followers to be able to make money online, right? So whether it be contributing to gaming, whether it be, again, offering a service, whether it be consulting, whether it be some kind of graphics, whether it be photography, whether it be, there's so many different ways that Z's are doing this. And they're making money at a young age. They're absolutely
Hmm.
making money at a young age because, again, you only need 500 followers really to be putting something out there that people will follow and people are potentially interested in buying. And because of the viral nature of TikTok or YouTube, really, if you do something that captures that captures the attention of your generation or the world, you're immediately launched into potentially millions of views,
Hmm.
and thousands of followers, and there you are launched as a creator, as somebody who is sought after for their product, for their service, whatever it might be.
Yeah. So I love what you're talking about because I think people are too obsessed with numbers and stats. I never look at my stats and my numbers because all I care about is providing great content,
Yeah.
and the clients come and the ambassadors happen. And I love that you talk to a 22-year-old who's very in tune, who's the youngest VC in the country, who's saying, as long as you have 500 people, I'm going to interpret what they said 500 ambassadors, 500 people,
Yes.
real people, right? Versus,
Yes.
because there's
Yeah.
there's that story. I can't remember the exact details, but the person had 2 million followers and couldn't sell 10 t-shirts. Those are
Yes.
followers. They're not
Right.
ambassadors who are following you. I
Exactly.
think there's a
Yes. And the other thing I was just going to say that I think is important for older generations to understand too is millennials really launched the influencer culture. And so we think of influencers as being, for example, millennials who are on Instagram and they are paid, right, by companies to wear their shoes, wear their clothes, incorporate those products into their life. That's actually very different from a Gen Z creator, because millennials have approached that with a lot of business savvy, right? I am going to create a a business as an influencer, and they go about that and treat that as a business. Whereas Z's, because they grew up creating from a really young age, for them so much of it is about the joy of creation, the authenticity of creation, and putting their voice in the world and putting their work in the world. and it's a different orientation. And so it is important, because what that means, to your point, is you don't necessarily just have as many followers who enjoy your Instagram pictures. You actually have people who want to know you as a person, and want to see your unique work and support you as a creator. And
Yeah.
so it's different. It really is different. And so there tends to be more of a community, and a much stronger connection to those creators than would have been the case in kind of the older influencer culture, if you will.
Yeah. This is fascinating. This is fascinating. I had read an article some time ago that said that the Gen Z generation will be equivalent to the greatest generation. So, any thoughts on that?
Well, what I think is interesting is that boomers have ruled our world for decades, right? Boomers, named boomers because they were born right after World War II, right? Beginning in 1946. And they were the largest generation for a long time. And they also happened to come of age during the largest economic boom of our time. And so for Z's, or I'm sorry, for boomers, they generally had good jobs, and they worked for corporations for long periods of time and had benefits, and were able to save for retirement and have controlled so much of the economics and politics in our country, right?
Right.
Until now. Millennials were a large generation as well, but they tended to make more incremental change. Whereas Z's, who are now overtaken our country as the largest generation, as we're seeing, are much more vocal, are much more unified, are much more savvy, and having both the digital tools and the confidence of voice to really take on our systems and
Yeah.
really demand change, whether it be from our government or from our corporations, whatever it might be. And we saw it, actually, it's really interesting when you think the oldest Z is only 24 years old, right? The median age of a Z is around 18 years old right now, 17, 18 years old. So still relatively young. Yet for the last election, the combination of millennials and Zs made up 40% of our voting electorate for the first time.
Wow.
And boomers made up about 40%, but in the past they'd been 60%, 70%, right? And so you're really seeing that even in our political landscape, that the youth vote and the youth voice, and the priorities of our youth are really just beginning
Yeah.
to enter into their full kind of power, right?
Yeah. I love it. I love it. AnneMarie, I want to talk to you again. This was
I would
fascinating.
love to. And sorry for
Yeah.
the technical
And
difficulties.
I think this was great. Tell everybody the name of your book again, where they can buy your book, and where they can connect with you.
Thank you. So the book is called Generation We, The Power and Promise of Gen Z. And John, when we were talking earlier, it is designed certainly for everyone, anybody who is a student of really culture and what's coming next, right? So whether you work for a corporation, whether you are a government official, whether you work for an educational institution, parents are really loving this book because it's helping them to understand their kids and how to talk to their kids.
Yeah.
That can be found on Amazon or really anywhere that books are sold. And if you want to learn more about the book specifically, probably the best place to go also is my website, AnneMarieHayek.com. There you can download a free chapter, you can access the book, you can read some kind of behind the scenes little nuggets there as well. So you can even take a quiz to see how much you know about Gen Z. It's kind of fun.
Was great. Well, I can't appreciate. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time, and thank you for the knowledge today. I think it was huge, and I think community. If you're a company out there that is creating your 3-year plan, your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan, you got to incorporate the evolution of what this generation is going to do to and for and with your companies, and the competition that they're actually going to sprout up that don't even exist yet, that you need to be on high alert for. Because most people are afraid to create, or have problem creating, or don't have content. And this generation, it's just second nature. So they're going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot to compete with this generation. So the older generations got to get ready. AnneMarie, we're going to talk again soon. I appreciate it. Think community, go out and buy AnneMarie's book. I think we all need a good dose of it. Thanks so much, AnneMarie.
Thank you so much, John, and everybody.